I'm gonna have a super productive day. In the next 24 hours, I'm gonna build as many things as I can, and I'm gonna run a marathon. Here's the plan. At the top of each hour, I'm gonna run a 1.1 mile loop around my neighborhood. That should take me 10 minutes or so. For the next 45 minutes, I'll build. I've got a dog door holder, a bookcase, some shop furniture, art projects, home repair, a bigger list than I can even do in a day. At 5 minutes till, I'll get to a stopping point, prepare my music, stretch, hydrate, all that, and then go again. It's gonna be amazing and awful at the same time. Those strips of plywood I cut at 11.5 inches with purpose. If you cut your plywood like a hot dog at less than 11 7/8, you yield 4 pieces. I stack them together to get them rough to size, and then the miter gauge cleans up that edge. Before I can cut them to final size, duty calls. A perk of running a marathon in this way is that I can stop and eat breakfast with my family and help with the normal tasks of the weekend, like setting up a little pool.
Are we going swimming it today? Probably. Yay!
Back in the shop, I'll straighten up the other side of my plywood pieces. Boiling in the back of some of your minds is, why didn't I do the classic miter saw flip? I'm sure that you're better than me and can achieve a perfect cut in that way. But even with a firm stop block, I always end up with a staggered edge. So I opt for the miter gauge. I'll then fancy it up a bit with some short vertical dividers before 3.3 needs my attention. 3.3 miles in so far, and it's pretty easy as you would expect. Although it is kind of weird stopping and starting, like your legs go into rest mode and then you ask them to run again. And I only expect that to compound as I do this 21 more times. So we'll see how it goes. For now, edge banding. This is meant to be a very utilitarian bookcase for my office, and I have a theme in that room which is plywood and walnut. My edge banding philosophy is to trim the short overhang with a razor blade, then use a double-sided veneer trimming tool for the long edge, and immediately feather all the cut edges before I even set it down. That veneer is so friable that I feel like catching on a lip of a workbench could easily break it free if you don't knock those edges down right away. Sometimes though, my desire to assembly line has me set them aside, but I'll just be sure to leave the veneered surface overhanging in open air. More at-home marathon perks, little performances before your next run. And the ability to put on a fresh shirt whenever you want. I'm now recutting that piece that I set on top of the miter saw because at this point I can't find it. So more edge banding and trimming. Assembly will be with screws that I'll cover with this walnut dowel, but it's not necessary here on the bottom as you won't see these. At this point I have so much motivation to build because of the clock. I know that each hour I only have a finite 45 minutes to make progress on a project and get to a point where I'm happy taking a 10-minute, in air quotes, break while I run. And as soon as I'm back, I feel the same need to be productive all over again. These screw locations in the horizontal shelf surface will be visible, so I'll drill them out with a 1/2-inch Forstner bit before driving in the screws. Same thing goes with the sides and the top before I have to get 6.6. What? It's like shoot yourself in the face with a nail. When cutting dowels into little plugs on the bandsaw, if you give it a little extra force forward at the end of the cut, the plug will roll backward into your other hand, making you feel like a boss. Since I was too lazy to change bits and countersink within my 1/2-inch hole, these plugs might sit directly on the screw heads, so I went with CA glue over wood glue. Okay, 6.6 miles down, and I'm gonna take a seat while those walnut plugs dry. He said, because they're already dry, it's super glue. I just want to sit down for a little bit. It's weird because I've never exercised and then done moderate exercise in between and then gone back to heavy exercise, back and forth, back and forth. So my legs are definitely feeling it. But 1/4 down, 3 to go. Yeah. And if you don't think woodworking is moderate exercise, saw off 27 dowel plugs by hand. The math savvy amongst you will have already put together that 1.1 miles 24 times is 26.4, not 26.2. So I planned one relief run that's only 0.9 to get to an exact marathon. This future voiceover John will tell you that it was a great idea planning that for the 3 a.m. run, as I was crushed at that point. If you ever wanted a legitimate excuse to eat like a madman, more so than it's Thanksgiving, run yourself a 24-hour marathon and you'll have zero regrets in stuffing your face every few hours. After a light sanding, I'll get this thing out of my shop and into the office so we can move on. So the next thing I'm going to work on is finding a home for this thing. So we have a dog door. At night we put this on, take it off in the morning, and then just kind of lean it against the wall, and it just doesn't look that good. So I think I'm going to make a real minimalist kind of holder for it to slide in about right here. But first, I've got to go accomplish 8.8. Oh boy. Let's hope that stays up there. It did stay up there. After each 8-hour stint, I went for a full refresh and had a shower, cleaned up, and moved on to the next thing. So what I'm thinking about for this is a piece that just runs down the side and a little bit of the bottom, mirrored on both sides, with a slit that's little more than 1/8 of an inch running up the middle. So this thing can just kind of slide down in there. On each 10-minute run, I had ample opportunity to think about my next move. I feel like I do this anyway during a build, just stand back and stare at it for a while. But thinking and planning while running helped me with a swing thought that I often have: live in your head. I tell myself this is a way of blocking out the pain of fatigue in my body and only focusing on what my brain is doing at that moment, not signals from my quads screaming about lactic acid. But those can't be blocked out forever. 9.9 miles down. Cramps are kicking in, a little bit of knee pain, but I didn't get rained on, so positive. A little fearful for the remaining 16 miles, because I don't see this knee pain just getting better on its own. So we'll see how it goes. Either way, I'll just keep building things and keep going until something breaks. Those pieces you saw me mill get their miters cut, and the almost inevitable burn marks left in cherry get sanded off, and I'll get them wrapped up with some glue while some ominous noises kicked off outside. Remember a second ago when I said, well, it didn't rain on me, so that's good. Right as I was getting ready to go on my 4 o'clock run, lightning, hail, the whole thing. So I think I'm gonna skip this one and we'll tack it on at the end of the whole thing. What are you gonna do? Nature. While I wait on the glue for the dog door holders to dry, I think I'll start on a slingshot for the kids. Don't tell my wife. This is a leftover piece of alder from a shelf project I'm working on, and I'll just rough out a shape that I think looks slingshotty, and before you know it, it's time for 12.1. If you run a marathon at home, you're not excused from the regular chores of life. But some parts you don't want to miss anyway. Dinner ate up most of my time, and I had to knock down 13.2, which I'm not counting as halfway because of the mile 11 miss. Using 3 different types of sanders hopefully means no missed splinters getting into my kids' hands. As it's starting to get late, I focused on getting as many loud power tool / dust collection operations done, so I'm not waking up the kids continually through the night. The dog door holder gets rounded over on the router table, and some plywood gets cut to size for some late night custom drawer organizers. I'm starting to become more of a fan of the cone bit on the Dremel. I use it to funnel out the part where the door would first slide in, so you don't have to be so precise in getting it into the groove. I've got an epoxy project planned as well, so I'll get some melamine pieces cut for a form. No more going through the loud big garage door starting at mile 14. 15 miles in, no, 14.3 miles in. And the wind is picking up, starting to sprinkle a bit, getting dark. So it's gonna suck from here until the end. But I got all the cutting done on the loud power tools, so there's a kid's bedroom right above you. So I gotta start being more quiet. But I got everything squared away. The knee is hitting. I had to walk one stretch just to give it a little break. But we're almost there, so we're gonna keep going. All right, step one, I think, is to finish these dog door holder things, so that way don't have to even think about them anymore. So it's just a little bit of hand sanding to get the burn marks off from the router. We'll put on some finish, and I think I'm just gonna double stick tape these right in place. Doesn't hold any weight, should be more than enough to keep it in place. Yeah, here, bug. I'll give these pieces my favorite wipe-on, wipe-off finish in Osmo, and move on to the Slingshot. This would obviously be better if I had some surgical tubing, but I'm just working with what I got on hand, rubber bands. Probably better to have less power, being that this is for a 5 and 2-year-old to use. I'll feed the bands through some gasket that I cut up, add an insignia, and give it some cutting board oil, as things tend to go in mouths sometimes. Just satisfying enough for a kid. With 10 more hours to go, this becomes more and more important. Those who know, know. Get everything cleaned up just in time for the 9:55 alarm, and it's lights on from here. I'm getting much slower up the ladder at mile 16. But at least it's time for another shower and begin caffeinating. I'll put together my form for the epoxy project, and in my previous rush I cut a piece too short, so one really long side it is. I like pocket hole screws for these forms because you don't need to countersink for any reason, and the pan head style of a pocket hole screw pulls the material up nicely. I want to lay some caulk before the next run alarm goes off, so we'll have some time to dry. I'm sure finger wiping is not recommended in the directions, but if you wipe it off right away and then wash your hands, I'm sure you'll be fine, I think. This far into it, I'll take retying my shoes every time for being able to take them off every mile. I'm going to glue down figurines that represent what my kid was into in her first 5 years. Those with kids can name all these, but we went from Elmo to Monsters Inc. to Peppa to Bluey and then Paw Patrol. God love them. One of my kids likes blue, the other likes pink, so I'll mix up a batch of each color. The blue started to swallow the pink, but after mixing them around, it cured with both colors. Next project is to do something about the mess in my power tool consumables drawer. I've got nails, air fittings, glue sticks, recip blades, jigsaw blades, anger grinder wheels, all that spewed in there. So I'll pull those all out around my plywood base that I cut earlier, and then it's time to go. So that was my first run post midnight, and I'm definitely feeling sleepy. It's like anybody can stay up past midnight, but when you've burnt so many calories during the day, it's like midnight feels like 5 a.m. right now. I've got plenty of quiet things to do, but I do have to cut some pieces for that drawer insert, and I think the quietest is the jigsaw. We're just gonna have to make that work. but I may sit here for a little bit. This late, I had no music playing, I was pretty tired, and working on this Kaizen phone was feeling hypnotic in an oddly satisfying way. Like, devoid of bird noises, cars driving by, and kids' voices coming through the shop walls, I got super zoned in on the task, and it was kind of invigorating. That is, until I had to do 20.9. From there, I started taking a bit more recovery time than earlier in the day, but there's still plenty to do. I need to make spots for 16 gauge, 18 gauge, 23 gauge, and staples. The way I would interact with those is to find the gauge that I want first, and then see what length I want to use. So I'm grouping them just by gauge. I'm going to tape these together because I need to cut these and that would make fewer cuts. I attempted the pole saw first, but that was making plenty of noise and would take me forever. So I just had to make 3 quick jigsaw cuts as quietly as I could. These hold no weight, so dabs of wood glue and CA glue are fine. As I said in a previous video on drawer organization, labels hold you accountable. I'll clean out the drawer, try and put it in, fail, take off a piece that's redundant, then get it into place and load it up right as the 1:55 alarm went off. It's past 2 a.m. and that last one was tough. I was probably like 2-3 minutes slower than normal. My body just doesn't want to do it anymore. But I have been holding on to the short one in green that's coming up next. I know it's like 0.2 difference than the rest of them, so it's going to be not even noticeable, but in my mind it's like, this nice like relief, but I don't think it's going to feel like it. But this was the perfect time to take it. Like, the 3 a.m. run is going to be tough, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to a 0.9. So anyway, let's keep doing stuff. You want to earn some points with your significant other? Write a nice long letter, handwritten only. Even better, make a YouTube video of you doing something crazy for 24 hours, and don't tell her that you wrote her a letter until she sees the video. You can pause here to read it if you'd like to, Amber. I'll check on the epoxy, it's looking good, and then finish up the dog door holder. Installing this made me really happy, as it was one of those projects that I've talked about for 18 months but just couldn't start it for some reason. So if you have any projects like that, make yourself physically exhausted and unbelievably sleepy and you'll get it done. 4 more runs to go. I'll complete one of those honeydews and re-calk the bathtub. I'm no expert here, but 2 pieces of advice. Take your time in removing the old caulk, and make sure your wife likes the new color first. Yes, this is my second time doing this. That whole lap I was debating on taking a power nap or not. Like a quick 20-minute. But I feel like having to wake up from that 20 minutes is going to be worse than just pushing through for 3 more hours. A nap would be so nice though, just right on the Alfie table. No, it's gonna be worse. It's gonna be worse. I was pretty foggy about what to do next, so I started to think about it, and said, might as well sweep as I thought. But I didn't find an idea while I was sweeping, it came because I was sweeping. Maybe it's the perfect action for brainstorming. It uses very little cognition to accomplish, and also it isn't a total waste of time physically, like staring at a wall would be. So I thought I'd honor that thought and make myself a little reminder sign, which I'm not gonna lie, pumped me up a little bit. You know what needs sorted out? This mess of a clamp rack. But first, let me finish that sign. Now onto the clamp rack. I'm not going to remake the rack itself. I'll just use a more sustainable sorting methodology. So I start by pulling everything down. I'll think about this on my next run, which is in 6 minutes. Okay, that was nice. There's a light breeze keeping me cool. The sun was just starting to come out. That felt good, and only 2 more to go, so I think I actually got this. After throwing away a useless Harbor Freight squeeze clamp, I'll put them all back up but with purpose. Specialized clamps like deep reach and corner clamps and ratchet straps are okay being harder to get to if it means much more frequently used guys front and center. I'll hold myself accountable here too. Some stretching and carbs and I'm out the door for the Pan Ultimate run, which I'll call mile 11 as I want to end on the 26.2. This whole experience was of course very physically taxing, but interestingly not really mentally taxing. Having this framework of 24 hours and a system for each hour remained motivating the whole day. On a normal day, you wouldn't bat an eye spending time lounging around, watching TV, or sleeping for 8 hours. But with this setup, I couldn't help but be enthusiastic about my 45 minutes of build time, and how each 1.1 miles was closer to the day's goal. Obviously not possible to live your whole life like I did that day, but maybe once every year or two, absolutely f***ing crush it for 24 hours and see what it does to you. Thanks for watching. Now I'm gonna go take a shower and go to bed. Good night.